Hey, John Gilroy here. Info Security Magazine says that 82% of phishing sites target mobile. Whew, what does this mean for the federal government? Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I'll be your moderator. Our guest today is Jim Coyle, U.S. Public Sector CTO of Lookout. So, Jim, did you bury your phone? Are you running scared from your phone? Or is this really true, all these mobile attacks? It seems to be a huge, big shift, doesn't it?
Thanks, John. Yeah, there has been a significant rise in mobile attacks just over the course of the last couple of years. And a lot of it really is, has a lot to do with just the fact that take a look at mobile devices and how enmeshed they are into our daily lives at this point, right? Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's got email on their phone. Everybody's got to log in, right, to, their office, whether it's email, some applications, getting access into data. So where does that multi-factor authentication token go? Goes to the mobile device.
Yeah, that's kind of dangerous. I mean, it's, 10 years ago, this would have been a very esoteric topic. It would have been just me and Jim. Nobody cares. Today, my wife, we were watching PBS News last night. They talked about Typhoon. It's like, wait a minute, Janet. Maybe Jim's not, in a little silo somewhere. This applies to everybody, whether you're working for a bank in Chicago or for the SEC in town here, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to think, again, everybody's got a cell phone. And because of that, you've got your entire personal life on that mobile device, right? You've got photos, you've got contacts, you've got personal email, which probably has receipts, probably has, sent emails for, various different bills, right? I mean, there is a treasure trove of information on these devices that are just sitting out there. And the real question is, well, what's protecting that mobile device?
Yeah, great. I opened with a fun fact, and we can do fun facts for the next 30 minutes if you want. Lookout does research, and maybe you can out fun fact me. I mean, I'll come up with some numbers. You can top me with some numbers, I guess you guys have looked at millions and millions of apps and looked at couple million different devices. So one of the facts, and I saw this on your website, lookout.com, is that something like half the devices that are out there are out-of-date operating systems. Let's get up to speed. Really?
Yeah, that's right. So, a lot of our research contains roughly right around 363 million apps that we have done a full stack analysis of. This is reverse engineering these apps, where we do static dynamic analysis. We poke and prod and see what happens and how the various different apps connect. We've also done the analysis of over 481 million URLs. This is, drive-by websites. This is phishing websites. These are websites that are ultimately out there to get you, right? And a lot of this is stemming from a little over 220 million devices that's providing us various levels of telemetry data. And so when we sift through this data on a regular basis, right, because we want to find out what are the various different trends, what are things that we can look at and talk about, and then how do we better our protections, more importantly. But what's kind of surprising is, when you take a look at mobile devices and when you think about like vulnerability management, when you think about risk management, over half of the devices are running out-of-date operating systems. And when you think about what that really means, an operating system gets patched typically because of security issues or because of other, technical glitches. And so when you think about the amount of 0 days that are being identified in both Android as well as Apple, and things like being able to do remote code execution, being able to utilize, certain vulnerabilities that grant you access to be able to run programs that ultimately turn your phone into a mobile spy. These are significant problems. And so when you've got these devices that are running out of date, you are highly susceptible to these attacks.
That means the millions of people who work for the federal government, they're going to be just as susceptible as Jim Coyle working at Jim's Donuts or something. So it's everyone's problem. So the federal government has to address it. And one way to address it is through some kind of a mobile device management system. Is that correct? Or endpoint management? Or where does Lookout fit in this picture?
Yeah, great question. So we are what's considered an MTD, mobile threat defense. And ultimately, the kind of key difference between mobile device manager and an MTD, mobile device management may say, hey, thou shall not download apps that are not approved by the administrator, right? Where mobile threat defense says, hey, regardless of what MDM says, if something is malicious, our job is to protect that device and stop the malicious activity from happening on that mobile device. So even though you may say, hey, my MDM says don't allow, any apps that I disagree with. Well, what happens when a threat attacker purchases or acquires a legitimate software development company, right? And this is stuff that we get to see quite often. Suddenly you have an SDK that becomes weaponized. And it could be, now we're talking about mobile app supply chain, right? If you're using a popular SDK and a quote unquote approved app, well, you've just approved a weaponized app. Who's paying attention on a regular basis of what's happening in the app world? That's where we come in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, this is going to be an interview full of fun facts. Back in the mid-'90s, I wrote for the Washington Post with a guy named Brian Krebs, and he's gone on to be rich and famous. And November 21st, that was a couple weeks back, you can go to Krebs on Security and read it. Federal charges were brought on some SMS-based attackers, and they must have enough evidence to put these people away for decades. I mean, here we go, John. They're going after the phones.
That's right. So Scattered Spider, right? I think this is the group that he was talking about. So this has been really kind of interesting over the last, I'll say 2 years. We've had a handful of groups. One of them is Octopus. They were made famous because they went after all the customers that Okta, has, and they were basically creating phishing sites off of their Okta pages. And a lot of it was mobile oriented because you were getting an SMS message, a text message that said, hey, you need to log in, and you click on the link because it looks legitimate, right? Sends you to a phishing link. Became really popular. There's a couple of other groups. Lapsus is another one that kind of picked up on this and said, hey, this is working, right? Scattered Spider, same thing. Now, I don't remember who's first, but the important piece here is they're all kind of linked because they're all using similar tactics. And Lookout, we call it what we've come to call the modern kill chain, where we're utilizing now mobile devices, right, in part of how an attack gets played out. Mobile devices are what's getting attacked, and that's first and foremost. You're getting the phishing link sent to your mobile device. It's not something that you can just hover your mouse over and check where that link goes, right? And you can do your best to take a look at the link, make sure it's vetted, right? But at the end of the day, if there's a redirect mechanism, if there's, any sort of, hidden URL behind that link, how are you going to stop it? And again, that's kind of where we come into play. Now, Scattered Spider was really interesting because these folks, for the majority, are U.S. citizens so far. As things are starting to unfold, and so you've got these English-speaking threat actors where if you're a U.S.-based company and you've got somebody who's purporting to be your IT team telling you, hey, there's been a problem with your account, we need you to go ahead and change your password, and they send you that a link to a phishing site that looks like your homepage, because they're English speaking, you've already kind of have this almost expected level of, hey, this actually might be somebody working at our IT firm, right? Versus maybe somebody, unfortunately, in the reality of thing, if there's an accent and your help desk is in Texas, right, it better be a Texas accent, because if it's not, right, you start to raise suspicion. So this kind of threw off quite a lot of organizations. Yeah. And so with these phishing kits, these are real-time, type capabilities where somebody logs into that Okta page, they put in their username and password, that attacker is seeing it in real time. So now they can take that username and password, go to log in, and because you just put in your username and password, you're now expecting that multi-factor to come and hit your device. So they log in. What do? You hit approve because you just logged in. You're expecting that token to come and for you to approve it. And so that's it. Now they've got access as you.
I got about 20 questions about MFA, but people listen to this podcast, they're walking their dog, I don't know, they're cleaning their deck or something or other, and they may want to get more information on Lookout. before the interview, you talked about some kind of threat intelligence report, or what does Lookout have available for my listeners?
Yeah, great question. So if you head over to lookout.com/threat hyphen intelligence, that is where all of our threat research gets to come out. Now, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is everything from financial threat actors to your nation state, threat groups, folks who are going after government-owned government and that type of thing. Or in the case that you mentioned earlier, Salt Typhoon, where you've got government against critical infrastructure.
Just this morning, podcasters always type in and they go into Podcast Connect and see what's going on. They look at completion rate, they look at everything's about their podcast, and MFA. Okay. So they just, and I assume, well, yeah, I go to Apple Podcast Connect, they want multi-factor authentication, but MFA ain't what it used to be. I mean, you talked about and I would think most people, well, it's multi-factor authentication, Jim, don't you get it? It's fine, isn't it? And Jim's going to go, no, whoa, wait a cotton pick in a minute. I mean, MFA can be compromised too.
It absolutely can. In fact, in my previous employer, I'm a former FireEye employee, we made some pretty big waves when we got breached. And, within a 24-hour period, we had announced to the world that, hey, some of our red team hacking tools got, unfortunately stolen oh, by the way, we immediately went into IR mode because we had, the best of the best in the IR business. And we have identified this thing called SolarWinds, and it's a supply chain attack, right?
Yeah.
Now, that was some pretty big news, right? And we gave all the information on the tools, all the information to be protected by them, and we ultimately burned them. But the important piece here, and not a whole lot of folks, I don't remember how many remember or attended the various webinars that our security team had put on, but we didn't have an alert. We didn't have some kind of shining moment that said, hey, you've been breached, right? What we identified was the fact that there was an individual who had 2 mobile devices, and it was an analytic rule. And so what ended up happening is the fact that I don't know if it was a SIM swap attack. I don't know if they just were successfully able to register 2 mobile devices, but whatever the case is, because of that multi-factor token going to a mobile device, the attackers knew it, and they were able to get a secondary phone, which was their phone, and that's all they needed. They just needed that secondary, multi-factor authentication to be able to log in.
Yeah. There are hints and rumors and intimations going on, and I've read that, hey, if you reboot your phone every single day, it will kill off any malicious code that's sitting in there. It sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Is that true, or is that just too simplistic?
Yeah, no, that's true. In fact, NSA put out a notice about a couple of months ago, and we've been kind of touting this for some time, but ultimately there is a large amount of mobile malware that cannot survive a reboot. It doesn't have persistence mechanisms, and it's just there to kind of reside in memory for as long as you don't reboot your phone. Yeah. And so there was guidance to say, hey, go reboot. It could be, various different pieces of, malware out there looking at text messages. It could be seeing the traffic that you're going to, whether it's social media, whether it's, various websites, all the way down to, even like crypto mining, right? Mm-hmm. But again, reboot your phone, malware goes away. And so that was just kind of that, that daily notice, if you will, of, hey, go to bed at night, reboot your phone, connect it to the charger, and then when you wake up, everything should be good.
Yeah. Speaking of notices, it's going to be my media show here. NBC News headline. You can look it up today. CISA and FBI are saying, we don't know a whole lot about what's going on. Maybe this Salt Tycoons. Let's go ahead and maybe encrypt everything. You probably read that recommendation, didn't you? I said, no, wait a minute. How many people even, normal humans even know how to encrypt messages? But this is the advice they're giving. This is not to, just for the FBI. No, this is for everybody in the United States, is to encrypt messages. That seems pretty drastic, doesn't it?
Yeah. So just in case, anyone's listening who hasn't been following on what's been happening, So unfortunately, a particular threat actor has successfully entered into a couple of mobile carriers. And so they've got direct access from a carrier level at information that mobile devices have. And that means text messages, that means where you go from a website perspective, any data that goes to and from your device, because it's from a carrier, it's their towers, it's their network, they have access to. Now, of course, this is where, the privacy, of encryption, right, is really going to get touted because things like VPNs can help protect that information using encrypted apps, like Signal or Telegram, right? You can chat, through encrypted channels. But if you're just an average Joe and you don't know anything about it, unfortunately, your information just kind of out in the ether to get collected. And the tough part here is you've got a nation state threat actor who is going after our communication systems. If this was, back in the 1940s, this is probably be an act of war. And unfortunately, we as a nation have not said enough is enough. We don't have a red line that says you shall not cross this line. Otherwise, Uncle Sam's going to get pretty angry. Yeah. And until that happens, there's no reason for these threat actors to stop. And now you're talking about, yes, this is critical infrastructure, but you also have to be reminded sometimes that these are private companies, right? I mean, maybe they're public companies, but at the end of the day, these are not government agencies that are getting hacked. These are, for-profit organizations that are being attacked by another country. And, we, again, as a country are kind of handcuffed legally at, being able to stop some of these threats. But also, there's, some level of, defense that also needs to happen at these organizations as well.
Yeah. Well, Jim, all kinds of topics to bring up, bounce around this and that. Earlier, you mentioned MDM and MTM, I think. Does Gartner, I think Gartner has an mobile device management category. Does it have a mobile threat management category? I don't know.
In fact, I think recently they had put something out there. And it's been something that we've been kind of asking for some time. And when you got to think, I mean, how long have mobile devices been out? 2006-ish, yep. Right? Was when iPhone came out. But, you've been able to surf your phone, for even before that. I remember Motorola Razors had had the capability to go out into the web, and I think even some of the Nokias had an ability to go out there. But mobile really needs to have kind of an eye from everybody, whether it's Gartner, whether it's just enterprise organizations. Again, just from an attacker's perspective, these days that the attackers are attacking an entity, the shortest route to success, lowest hanging fruit, whatever terminology you want to use here, you go after an individual. And when you go after an individual, things change because on an individual level, there's different tactics that you can take. There's going after mobile devices, right? Some organizations will swear by MDMs, mobile device management, and they won't do anything outside of that. And there's tons of ways around that. Or when all else fails, something else that we've started to see, Microsoft reported on this as well, but there is this back to mob mentality where violence is a service. I believe you mentioned Brian Krebs earlier. He's written on this a couple of times, but we're starting to see this, this elevated, hey, give me your username and password. I'm going to throw a brick through your house. Hey, we're going to come and beat you up.
Wow, that's kind of interesting. I was raised in a neighborhood like that, so I think I understand that physical violence threat. I listen to a podcast called Feds at the Edge, and they talk about edge computing. They talk about mobile devices. They talk about IT and OT. So where do you fit in with the threats from OT and sensors on machines? And a lot of these sensors are being made today, and the companies go out of business. They can't change them. So do you play with that category at all?
Yeah. And so things are kind of interesting because I'm going to give you the famed consultative answer of it depends.
No.
When you think about Android, right? Android's done a really great job at becoming popularized. It's, low cost to entry, and you can find Android as everything from refrigerators to HVAC systems to embedded infotainment systems, right? So sometimes mobile could be considered IoT. Otherwise, mobile's just kind of considered mobile in most
Yeah.
cases. We like to call it the modern endpoint just because,
Yeah.
again, you can do most of your workload on those mobile devices. But yeah, depending on the operating system, it can be quite varying.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, here it is, January coming up around the corner here. Everyone's making predictions, Super Bowl predictions, making predictions about World Series. And now that's going to be too hard for you, Jim. I'm asking a prediction about mobile security. And I mean, when it gets to be on, PBS, when it's on NBC, when Brian writes about it's like, okay. Okay. I mean, is it going to have to be an incident, or what do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years here with this whole idea of mobile threats?
Yeah, so what I can say, because it hasn't been released yet, come to the Lookout website. Our predictions will be released.
Ooh, this is a tease.
It is, right? But what I will say is I don't see mobile issues going away, right? I do see them rising. Again, everybody has a mobile phone. Some people have multiples. And it's just a greater attack surface area for attackers. And it's a multitude of ways to get into organizations, a multitude to get into access into identities of individuals. And at the end of the day, sometimes it's the keys to the kingdom, especially when it comes to multi-factor. So I don't see these things going away. I do see that more mobile issues are probably going to come about as more and more attackers kind of take place of those who are currently, getting picked up by the Justice Department. But I would say, be on the lookout for mobile issues, right? And maybe think about getting some protection.
Yeah, I think it's coming more and more. I mean, I have electricians come out to my house and they don't operate. Everything's by text message. They'll send an estimate by text. They'll say when they arrive by text, and they send the invoice by text. It's like this whole, desktop is, I don't know, it's like a, writing with a feather or something, I mean, it's just, it's gotten to change. And I think it's a interesting new world, brave new world for you in the next few years here. This is going to be a lot of fun to see what happens with Lookout.
And to give you something else to think about, right? Since the pandemic, a lot of restaurants have changed to where instead of giving you a menu, they'll just give you a QR code.
Yeah,
well, what's a QR code? At the end of the day, it's just a URL.
Yeah.
So how do you tell the difference between a legitimate QR code and a malicious one?
Yeah, who knows? Coming up in 3 months, we'll have the answer to the restaurant dilemma with Jim Coyle.
Well, and again, that's why we exist, right?
Yeah.
We are out there in order to protect mobile devices.
Yeah, good. Well, great. I think you've given us tons of stuff to worry about and think about, too. This is a fun interview here. I'd like to thank my guest, Jim Coyle, U.S. Public Sector CTO for Lookout. And my name is John Gilroy, and thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast.